Hello, everyone, and welcome to Self-Published Success, a show that highlights forward-thinking authors who chose self-publishing over traditional and found success in doing so. My name is John Feldman, founder and CEO of Visionary Literary, and your host for today's show. Our guest today is Dr. James Richardson. Dr. Richardson is the founder of Premium Growth Solutions, which is a strategic planning consultancy for early-stage consumer packaged goods brands. He and his company have helped to scale brands owned by Coca-Cola, Frito-Lay, General Mills, the Hershey Company, and more. Dr. Richardson is also the author of the Amazon best-selling book, Ramping Your Brand: How to Ride the Killer CPG Growth Curve, and the host of his very own podcast, Startup Confidential. Dr. Richardson, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John.
Good. So we are very excited to have you. Some good questions today, focusing on book marketing, launch strategies, how to really get your brand out there, basically what you have helped your companies do. We can sort of relay that information into book marketing, book launch strategies. So before we dive into the good meaty questions, tell us a little bit more about yourself, about your background, where you come from, what got you into your business, and then what also made you write your book.
Ooh, okay. This is going to be an exercise in concision.
Okay.
You can give me a grade afterwards.
Okay.
I was a cultural anthropologist for about 10 years. I jumped off the academic train pretty early. I won't get into why, mostly personal, honestly. Didn't want to live in the middle of rural Iowa. Sorry. And I got into market research as sort of a backup career, but I wound up in a firm that was doing really interesting work in the organic and natural foods movement. This was back in 2003, guys. So that market was a tenth the size it is now, and so but it was growing like it was growing double digits. So it was an interesting time. One of my first clients was Whole Foods market. So we actually did strategic market research for the leadership team most of the time. And that was really eye-opening. So it was fun to be at the cutting edge of an actual cultural shift in the United States, and be studying it as it was unfolding. And I'm an anthropologist, so I as I've said on many other shows, I am weird, and I was trained to study weird things.
Interesting.
And let's be honest, any brand that's new has very low awareness and is by definition weird.
Very good point.
Because it's unknown, and humans don't trust unknown things. So it's just the reality. So your biggest problem, no matter what you're marketing, when you're brand new, is why should I trust you? Why? So, and that's the fundamental battle that most people lose, including selling a book.
Right.
So, and it is a battle.
It is.
So luckily, I had two things going for me, John, in that battle to get the book out. One is that I did 3 years of field work in southern India, where that's the only white guy around. And so literally, and everyone was very dark skinned. So I stood out like a light bulb. And so developing trust became mission critical.
Right.
So I've been in the position of everyone staring at me 24 hours a day. Who the hell is he and what is he doing? And in India, they'll come up and they'll get up on your business if they're having a bad day. So I've realized what it's like to not inspire trust just by showing up. So it was also my boot camp, right? So I made it through that. I also am a student of early stage brands. And then the number one thing that struck me early on when we did research for Whole Foods, which your listeners will find interesting because I'm sure a bunch of them shop there, at least occasionally, is that in the first year or so, and you have to understand that I've I've personally been in like almost 200 Whole Foods for research purposes. At the time, it was virtually everyone. So now there's 500. And I spent hours shopping the stores, shopping with people, going into their pantries, doing anthropological social science essentially in their house. And the thing that struck me early on was that nobody could remember the name of new brands that they were consistently eating and loved. It took them about 6 months. Because the trademark of something new, especially in food and beverage, you're attracted to product-based symbolism. That's the key insight. The brand literally is meaningless. It's not Oreo. You say Oreo, and suddenly there's hundreds of associations. You might have flashbacks, post-traumatic episodes. Who knows? But I mean, if I just tell you about some new brand that just appeared, it's riding only on its denotative meaning. It has no aura.
Right. A good point too.
So that the product is everything, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they would remember the product and the package design, but we would have to go back to their fridge to find the name of the brand. It happened hundreds of times. It got comical, actually. Some of these are brands like Stonyfield that are huge now. So think about your book title, same problem.
Right. Right.
Just because you fussed over your book title does not mean that by itself it's going to get remembered easily.
That's true.
So, but circling back to your final question, why did I write the book? I wrote the book because I didn't have a business. I mean, I had income, but it wasn't a business.
Right.
It was too much dependent on me, like going to trade shows and doing the card handing crap that happened before the pandemic, and just trying volumetric sales conversations. They would, right. And that can lead to some business, but it generally leads to, in professional services, it leads to pretty low ticket, not very profitable business. And so I was struggling to find out where in the ecosystem for a couple of years I was going to fit. And it took me about 2 years of wandering and bumbling and then doing work for clients at very low fees, just to cover my costs and a little more. And to figure out that, there's a special group within early stage consumer packaged goods that were going to work with me. And so the problem was that I needed to raise my prices like 10x. So the only way I could imagine to do that would be to take some research that I had access to from my former company. They legally authorized me to use it and to publish it, and then create essentially a reference guide to highly ambitious new food and beverage founders,
right?
So that they could learn from the best practices of brands that I had spent years studying professionally. Right. Originally, I thought it was going to be startups, like the hordes of people who just started, like that they were going to be my clients. That's how I started the business, and that is just not true. Or if it was true, I would literally be making $50 an hour on Stripe, payments. So, because that's what they'll pay.
Right.
I definitively proved it. And I said, and so this guys, you have to realize that you have to pick your business model that you want and then build the strategy to fuel the business model. You do not. And then find the customers who can fit into that business model. It really does. It's this dance between the business model. And so the book to me was about getting the prices way up, creating an aura of national expertise. It's everything that Dory Clark writes about. In fact, I was studying her. I'm a disciple of her books and movement to her course. I read Entrepreneurial You, which is a great book if you're doing B2B professional services. It's a brilliant book because you're going to be running an internet-based content marketing driven business.
Right.
So the book was about getting the price up so that because what I realized was that I wasn't going to have a lot of clients, John, every year. There's just no way. There aren't. I'm in a world where classic supply demand algorithms of macroeconomists, they don't work.
Right.
Like the number of clients I worked with has gone up as my price went up 10x. Just so it's clear that supply demand has no relationship to what it did.
Right. Right. So many founders find that too. I mean, you read that.
It's very true in professional services.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, in the world that I work in, food and beverage, it's the exact opposite. Like the minute, if you start really if you could jack your prices up to artisan level, you can just watch the sales. It's just it's very predictable. Anyway, so that's why I wrote the book, was I had a business model problem.
Okay.
I didn't have like an audience problem for free content and James blabbing on the internet. There was plenty of people. But people who pay? Ooh.
Yeah. Well, so you wrote the book for the exact reason that so many other founders and business owners wrote the book, right? You needed to establish your credibility if you were going to increase your prices to a point where it was really worth it to have a business and not to, be a magician trying to spin plates, paying your bills, and, playing that race to the bottom with other companies trying to establish the lowest price just to win.
So I would,
clients.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one thing I would add, and just in case it might be unique, I have no idea. I may be an anthropologist, but I got really good at personal finance for many reasons. So when I started my business in 2017, I did have a severance, and I know a lot of people jump off a cliff, and so they're in a different situation, and God bless them. And you can do, if you have enough cash, you can probably pull that off. But I had a severance. I kind of knew when it was going to end, right? And it was 2019. So I had a 2-year clock. I knew that by the middle 2019, we were going to be sucking fumes, gas fumes, to pay the mortgage and everything else. And so I actually created a survival budget 2 years in advance. I said, in 2 years, if the shit hits the fan, this business has failed. How do we save the house? I was that pessimistic. And the beauty of it was that I ran the numbers and I said, this is going to suck. We'll live, but we're going to be really beyond miserable. And so it gave me a deadline, and it clarified, and it motivated me. Good. Because I was like, I don't want to have to live off that spreadsheet. I want the other spreadsheet.
Right. And what did that spreadsheet look like?
That spreadsheet was worse than how I'm doing now, but it was like, okay, this is good. We can stay in the house, and we could keep paying a house cleaner, for example. My wife works very long hours, so it's like we're a working couple, right? with kids. So it's like the house is getting dirty. So we're the kind of demographic that hires some kind of housekeeping help every once in a while. So anyways, but here's the thing. As the severance faded and the business wasn't taking off, I did something else. I fired the housekeeper. I fired everyone that worked with us. And I did it all. I cleaned the toilets. I cleaned the shower tubs. And I did this for about 2 years. And that was actually a better motivator than even the spreadsheet. Just the humiliating yourself, because obviously I enjoy doing that.
Right.
So, and I did it badly, and my wife would complain. So I got double punishment. So that's great. So, I'd really advise people to take, this is an old monastic trick, right? It's kind of like beating yourself with a thorny branch. It really freaking works. Set up a structural punishment for yourself. Even physical one, like I did. Clean the toilet bowls yourself, right? I mean, do it daily if it's really humiliating, right? And then that motivates you to succeed in a very deep unconscious level. This is a sociological insight. Humiliation motivates people. Either that or it destroys you. Now, if it's self-inflicted, it tends to motivate you.
Right.
So those two structural things I did because I know I had a big ego. I was used to a big salary, so I had to swallow more humble pie than the average person.
That's an interesting concept.
I made myself do it.
Yeah.
Because I really, really wanted this to work so badly. I don't know how else to say it. So anyway, that's my random financial insight: is plan for disaster before you have to take away all the luxuries in your life. And
That's
make yourself punish yourself in advance.
Yeah. And a good thing too, again, this is more personal finance, right? But you had that spreadsheet, so you knew exactly when your severance was.
I was disgusted by how much we were spending.
Yeah. Well,
it was kind of embarrassing, actually.
Well, so then you got the business back on track, right? And obviously you wrote the book to help do so. But one thing about the book is that it was an Amazon #1 bestseller, right?
Yeah.
And one thing that we were talking about before we pressed record was, if you build it, they will come, right? Any business person, any author, anyone who's ever launched any product knows that that is complete BS. It's not true. If you build it, they will not come. There are 1 million books published every year and put onto Amazon. There's no way that if you build it and just put it out there, everyone will come, besides maybe your parents. So
exactly.
What was your strategy for getting this book to become a bestseller? What was your launch plan?
I networked with people who had done it.
Okay.
I'd say Dory Clark's course was actually helpful, because she has a Facebook community full of people who have done it. And so but I also did just a ton of research, because there's more and more information out there. So here's what I did. I decided early on that I was going to set a publishing deadline, and I was just going to make that work somehow. And it came close to being almost crazy, but it was about 7 months. I wrote the book in 2 months, but what I did was I immediately started talking up the book, like literally the moment I made the decision to do it.
Right. I
hired a book designer and editor, because I knew I had known that those people, the good people, book out. And so I got those people locked in. And I got the book cover done first.
Yep.
These are things I learned from other people. And so now I have something I can visually market, and now because I could just talk it up forever, right?
Yeah.
So I was building a LinkedIn following since the very beginning. You must have a social media following.
Yes.
Or an email list already, or this is not going to work. And so I would just go out there, and these book posts just generated massive amounts of engagement. And I started to sense that, oh my God, that this is a topic someone should have written about a long time ago, clearly. Picking the topic, guys, is actually important, because that's what will drive the quality of the content, and then
correct,
the word of mouth. What we're talking about right now are some of the mechanics to make sure that your awesome content doesn't flounder. The two of us can't solve your well, maybe you can, John. I can't solve the listener's content problem if your content's mediocre, or if it's like the 79th book on X.
Right.
It doesn't matter what we're talking about now, it will not move.
Right.
So you do want to spend time making sure you've got something differentiated to say. It doesn't actually have to be Einsteinian genius. My book has some research that was highly unique, and that is the credibility marker that kicks it off in the introduction. A lot of what I talk about in the book, for anyone experienced in venture capital in the industry, is pretty common sense. So it's about 70% common sense, which someone new doesn't know. Right. So it's great for them. And then 30% secret sauce, like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. Even the experienced people didn't know that. So that's a ratio you could think about if you're targeting an industry, is make sure you have 20 to 30% truly innovative content. And then the rest can be pretty much regurgitation of basic common sense. That's all the reader needs to get the word of mouth going. But what I did was I just advertised it constantly. At least 2 times a week I was posting about. Then I paid my book editor extra and the designer extra to get the introduction completely done, like ready to publish at Random House, like as I was writing the rest of the book. So the part where you talk about what the book's about, we left that off, right? Because the book wasn't done. We just did the meat, the really cool shit. So the hook, right? And your introduction has to have a hook.
Right.
It has to have a killer hook. And then I just basically created a book website at the same time. And the book website just becomes this thing where it's like, wow, this looks serious, right? It's a social proof device.
Correct.
And then you just start funneling traffic to the book site as often as you can, any way you can. Podcast interviews are one way to do it. That's why I keep doing them, right? As I keep selling the book, ramping their brand. Oh, it's in the background. Yeah, I also learned to have the book in the back of all the video interviews you do.
Yeah, correct.
I laugh, but that's the kind of easy thing that I would forget.
Yep.
So, advertise the crap out of the book. I'm writing another book. It's actually not for business, and I'm actually going to chronicle the entire production and get people involved in it.
Yes. Yeah. That's a great.
Because this one needs to sell 10 times as many copies.
Yeah. Because of the category, or because of your
because I want to become a royalty sucking author, right? So I make about $12,000 a year on Audible and KDP royalties off my current sales rate. And I'm in year 3. My royalties actually been creeping up because I'm selling more books every year. That's also the sign that you have a word of mouth driven thing.
Correct. Yes.
Fad shit books driven by PR, sorry for the swear, they sell 90% of their lifetime copies in the first year.
Right.
And then you have to keep writing.
Yeah.
That's what Simon Sinek does. He has to keep writing books. Sorry. I was next to Simon for 3 weeks when I was a bestseller. Right? So that bestseller tag that John was talking about, you're not going to have that for very long. You just need to get it. And there's a math to get it. And when you get it, you freaking screen grab it. And then you can market the crap out of it as if it's a permanent honor.
Exactly. Hey, that's what the New York Times best-selling authors, they do that.
Oh, it's the same thing. Yeah. They sold 3,000 copies in 1 week. And then it's shocking how many of them sell like 100 copies in week 2.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll see that. There are so many analytics tools that can show that, James Patterson puts a new book up and it's, well, maybe not James Patterson. He has quite a following, but.
So the other thing that I did that I think was important, I'm thinking social, like a social scientist, was that I found a key sponsor.
Okay.
I had done enough. I knew enough about business books. I've been reading it for years. I knew all about the power of that cover blurb on the cover, and then the book praise inside. I knew that I had to figure that out.
Yeah.
And I talked to a whole bunch of people, and and so this networking, researching on how to do it, you got to do that.
Yes.
And don't just listen to podcasts. Also go talk to people, because some of these tactics evolve and new things appear. So always do a refresh by networking. So I talked to people, and it became clear that I needed to get somebody excited, someone in my industry who was a mega influencer. So that kids, this requires you to realize that you suck. Right? There's someone more important than you.
Yes. Yep.
That's the second slice of humble pie after the financial disaster. And then you have to supplicate them like a deity. No, you don't want to be completely sycophantic in the US, because that creeps people out. In India, you go fall at their feet and they love it. So, but
interesting.
Even politicians do that all the time.
Yeah, cultural.
So, and I found that guy, and what I did, I didn't know who it was going to be, but what I did was I sent the introduction. I sent the PDF. I put it up online. I hosted it on the book site on a secret page. And then I sent the link to like 5-6 people who I knew were big endorsers. Mm-hmm. And only one of them responded, but he responded immediately. And he read it very quickly. And he's like, this is amazing. This is really going to help the industry so much. All right. And this is the guy on the cover of my book who grew Annie's mac and cheese and sold it to General Mills for $800 million.
Ooh. Nice payday.
So very important guy in the industry. But I do want to point out one thing. One way you find these people, if you're in professional services, is it's probably probably someone who was either a client of yours in the past or knew the company you came from. Right. And a lot of people like me, we leave consulting firms, law firms and stuff. So you go back into that world and you find that's where you create your list, because half the trust that causes them to read the introduction to your book you sent them for free is on the basis of that firm identity you had. And that was very much what was going on with John. He didn't know me well. I'd never even talked to the guy.
Right.
I'd emailed him a few times. Well, actually, I talked to him once at a conference, so that might be, it's not a bad idea to do a stalking of these people just to say hi, blah, 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 massage their back and then go away, right?
Networking in general is huge. Yeah.
Yeah, I hate it, but I think networking is face-to-face with these key endorsers, if you haven't met them, is hugely important.
Yes.
So even if you have to go to a conference just to stalk them, it's worth the $2,000 investment. Yeah. I know that sounds insane, but it is.
Even if you don't yet have your book, right?
Right. Now,
networking early.
Yeah. So, because I think the face-to-face memory with John helped him remember. Yeah, he seems like a bright guy. He also knew the firm, like the firm I was at. So that's where you want to look. Don't just pick famous people out of the internet, because it will probably fail.
Right.
You know, I to this day can't get the time of day from Dan Levetsky and a whole bunch of other people who I highlight in the book.
Right.
And I never will, probably, and I don't really care anymore. But the point is, you don't want to shoot too high. But it has to be someone more important than you.
I mean, that's a good bar to set, right?
Absolutely has to. Yeah, they have to have a bigger audience. They have to have a massive amount of credibility. Probably more likable than you, if that's possible. Not hard in my case, but but because the likable people have big networks.
Right.
The likable people usually are extroverted, and they tend to do a lot of happy posting. Mm-hmm. Now, my corporate brand is very much tough love, so I just don't do that. But I still have 10,000 followers on LinkedIn. Anyway.
Oh, good. So you can take someone else's hard work by reaching out to those who are above you. All their years of hard work can help you if you get in front of the right person and have the right conversation. So
he was clearly 4 months before publication, and the book was actually being finally edited at that point. And I do think there's an ethical issue here. Just don't reach out, don't send an introduction to a very important person in your industry and not be finishing the book. You need to have proven to yourself that you're actually going to do this. Otherwise, you're going to really, really destroy your reputation.
Very good point.
So I got him on board, and I was able to then use his name to get a whole bunch of people in the industry to just come like lemmings. Including a very high-ranking private equity firm, which also added credibility to the book.
Good.
And the minute you start getting quotes, you start advertising, right?
Yes.
And put them on your book site. And so that snowballing effect of that key person, it's absolutely works in a tight-knit industry like mine. Anyways, I sold 1,000 copies of the book in the first 2 months. And I have read elsewhere that if you can do that within 90 days, you generally are going to generate word of mouth, because there's obviously something before the book appeared that brought people to this. There was a need you created or unleashed already, right. Which was what the book advertising was. I was giving excerpts. I was marketing the introduction to generate an email list.
Right. There are so many different things that we can,
Now, this does cost money to pre-produce all this stuff, but if you're self-publishing, the assumption here is you're not completely broke ass.
Right.
Now, I did use home equity loan. When I started my business, we had the big sit down with my wife.
Same here.
And that's why I created the disaster spreadsheet, because I wanted her to really appreciate what I was asking the family to put at risk here.
Right.
And at that time, I lost my train of thought. What was I just talking about?
So if you're self-publishing, that you are not poor, and that you have to put money into some of these avenues. Yes.
So I took out a $50,000 home equity loan when I started my business as basically an absolute, to me, it was like a mortgage payment emergency fund. Right. It was based on the utter worst case hellhole scenario. when even my wife's salary couldn't keep us afloat. But I ended up spending only half of it, and I spent it on the book production, which is a brilliant thing. There's a brilliant use of that kind of low interest debt.
It's an investment. Yes.
Yeah.
Investment.
So, yep. So that's what you want to spend like a loan on.
Right.
Just FYI, you really don't want to spend it on your grocery bill.
Right. That's not making you anything. Right. As we see with your book, though, like you invested that money, you created the book, and it's been an asset for your brand and your business, and it has gotten you to the spreadsheet that you wanted and beyond. Right. So it was a good.
Yeah. Investment. I mean, I think the one thing I would say is you have to understand, especially in the white collar B2B professional services world, that you may bust your ass and do everything perfectly, like we're narrating, quote unquote. Don't expect like $200,000 worth of business to fall in your lap in the first 4 weeks after the book comes out.
Right.
I mean, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It actually took about 6 months for me to realize, oh, wow, things are changing.
Yeah.
And you can imagine after you spend 25 grand on research, production, all this other stuff, you're just sitting there going, yep. Luckily I had a global pandemic to distract me. I know that sounds super dark, but that's what was going on.
Yeah.
I was massively distracted, which was good.
Right. So
I didn't obsess.
Yeah. But you look, so you took out the money, you invested. There is this episode, this conversation has been fantastic. There is so much we could obviously talk for hours and hours and hours about book production and marketing and the benefits. But I just want to before we kind of wrap things up here, your brand, your book, where can people find you? What's next for you? Where do you want to direct people from here?
Oh, so I would say if you're intrigued just on how the book panned out, go to Amazon.com, look at Ramping Your Brand. It's in all 4 formats. I even have an Audible book. I paid $2,800 with a sound engineer to produce that. And if I have actually a PowerPoint deck, I'll send to anybody who emails me at admin@premiumgrowthsolutions.com. If you're interested in that, I will teach you how to do it. All the steps. I'm super nerdy. It's very doable, guys. You don't have to fall for the ACX boutique BS. And then you get more royalties. Anyways, if you're interested, so that's what I would plug, because I'm here to plug. And if you know anybody who is thinking about starting food, beverage, personal care business, anything sold at Target to consumers, please recommend my book. Have them read it first. They'll at least know how ambitious they are by the end.
We will link that book and your website into the show description, the show notes. James, this has been an excellent conversation. Thank you for your input, for joining us, and we wish you all the best in your next book and with your business.
Thank you so much.